Richard Parker was a man who built everything from nothing. A real estate developer who turned empty lots into skylines. He was disciplined, honest, the kind of man people trusted. But after his wife, Laura, died of cancer, something inside him broke. He stopped going out, stopped smiling, lived in silence for years. Ethan, his only son, tried to visit every weekend. But nothing seemed to lift his father's spirit anymore. Until one day, a woman named Amber walked into his life. She was radiant, confident with that fake perfect Instagram beauty. Long blonde extensions, tan skin, lips too full to be real. She met Richard at a luxury spa owned by his friend. She called herself a wellness coach, whatever that meant. She sold overpriced vitamins and did tarot readings for clients. But she knew exactly how to make someone feel special. Richard was lonely, vulnerable, craving warmth he hadn't felt in years. Amber gave it to him, or at least made him believe she did. She laughed at his jokes, touched his arm, listened to his stories. In a few weeks, she had his full attention. Ethan met her at dinner one evening. She smiled too much, asked too many personal questions. "So your dad owns several buildings?" she asked casually. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were calculating. Ethan's gut screamed that something was off. He kept his answers vague, testing her reactions. When Richard left the table, Amber leaned closer. "You're lucky," she whispered. "Most people don't grow up rich." Ethan's smile faded. He realized she wasn't in love with his father. She was in love with his money. But when he told Richard later, the old man brushed it off. "She's just curious about my life," he said. "She wants to understand me better." Within 6 months, Richard was talking about proposing. Ethan tried to stay calm, tried to be supportive. But every fiber in his body told him this would end badly. The wedding happened anyway, extravagant, expensive, absurd. Amber invited influencers, models, and distant relatives she barely knew. Richard looked proud, smiling like a man reborn. Ethan stood beside him as best man, pretending to be happy. His wife Claire leaned over and whispered, "She's going to ruin him." Ethan didn't answer. He already knew. After the wedding, Amber moved into Richard's mansion. She redecorated everything within weeks. New furniture, new style. She said the house had bad energy from the past. She replaced photos of Laura with her own portraits. Richard didn't notice, or maybe he didn't want to. He was too busy buying her things. A Range Rover, designer bags, spa memberships, private retreats. Amber smiled for Instagram, always tagging self-leveraging. Her followers adored her transformation story. Ethan saw something else, a predator playing house. The woman had found her perfect target. And his father, blinded by hope, couldn't see the danger at all. The first year of their marriage was a slow-motion disaster. Amber turned Richard's quiet home into a stage for her ego. Every corner became a backdrop for her social media photos. She called the mansion her manifestation success story. Richard smiled proudly every time she said it. Ethan wanted to shake him and scream, "Wake up!" Amber's spending habits grew like wildfire. First came the Range Rover, then the luxury wardrobe. She said her brand required constant reinvention. Richard paid for it all without hesitation. He even joked that he was investing in his wife's career. Her career, however, was nothing but a fantasy. She posted photos, sold fake wellness packages online. Thousands of followers believed she was a self-made coach. Only Ethan knew every dollar came from his father's account. Amber began to control every part of Richard's life. When Ethan visited, she was always there watching. She interrupted conversations, redirected topics, demanded attention. If Richard tried to talk about business or family, she cut in. "Oh, honey, let's not stress about boring stuff today." Ethan started visiting less often because it hurt to watch. His father looked older, weaker, constantly tired. Amber blamed work stress, though Richard was retired. Claire, Ethan's wife, said it straight. She's isolating him. But Richard refused to see it. He said Amber made him feel young again. Amber called him my rock, but treated him like a wallet. Every few weeks, there was another cosmetic procedure. Breast implants, rhinoplasty, lip fillers. She said it was self-improvement, and Richard applauded her confidence. The bills were obscene, but he never complained. He thought he was helping her find herself. The truth was, she was erasing him piece by piece. Amber began hosting influencer parties at the house. Music, champagne, cameras flashing until midnight. Richard would sit quietly in a corner, exhausted. Ethan saw photos online of his father barely smiling. He looked like a guest in his own home. One night, Richard called Ethan and sounded different. Tired, hesitant, but still defending her. She's just ambitious, he said softly. She believes in what she's building. Ethan wanted to believe it too, but he knew better. He had seen the bank records, the disappearing assets. Amber was draining him dry under the mask of love. The red flags were now neon signs. Richard began selling properties for liquidity. Amber claimed she needed cash for new ventures. No one knew where the money went. When Ethan confronted her, she smiled coldly. "You should mind your own marriage," she said. The words hit like venom. Amber wasn't just taking money, she was taking control. And the man who once built an empire couldn't see he was being destroyed. Every smile she gave him was calculated. Every touch was currency. And by the time he realized it, Amber already owned his soul. The second year of their marriage turned darker. Amber's charm started to fade, replaced by sharp words and demands. Richard looked like a man, constantly walking on eggshells. He had deep circles under his eyes and spoke less every day. Ethan visited once and barely recognized his father. Amber greeted him with her usual fake smile. She wore diamonds that Richard never mentioned buying. During dinner, she dominated the table conversation. She talked about her wellness empire and upcoming brand deals. Richard sat there, nodding like a silent investor. When he tried to speak, she interrupted him with a laugh. "Oh, honey, that's not what the market is doing anymore." Her tone was condescending, her confidence suffocating. Ethan caught Richard's eyes and saw quiet humiliation. After that night, Ethan called Claire in tears. "He's fatting, Claire. She's draining the life out of him." Amber started taking full control of Richard's finances. She convinced him to merge accounts for simplicity. Soon, she knew every password, every asset, every property. She said she wanted to help him manage things better. In truth, she was slowly dismantling his security. Within months, 3 investment properties were sold. Amber claimed she was diversifying their portfolio. Ethan only found out from Marcus, Richard's lifelong friend. Marcus called and said, "Your dad's selling income properties. Something's wrong." Ethan's stomach dropped. He booked a flight to Portland that night. When he arrived, Amber looked surprised, almost scared. Her smile flickered before she forced it back on. Richard looked thin, pale, and tired beyond his years. They all sat for dinner, but he barely ate. Amber talked about a new MLM she joined, some wellness pyramid scheme. She called it a community of empowered women. Richard's hands trembled when he reached for his glass. Ethan tried to speak privately with his father, but Amber hovered. The next morning, Ethan caught him alone at a cafe. "Dad, are you okay?" he asked softly. Richard hesitated, staring into his coffee. "Marriage is harder than I remembered," he whispered. "Is she treating you right?" "It's fine," he said quickly, then looked guilty. His voice cracked when he added, "I'm just tired." It was the first time Ethan saw fear in his father's eyes. Amber had him completely under control. She used guilt, charm, and silence to manipulate him. Every decision he made was influenced by her. Even his old friends noticed he'd become withdrawn. When Marcus confronted him, Richard defended her again. She makes mistakes, but she means well. It was denial, plain and painful. Amber had become the center of his world and the edge of his downfall. Ethan left that weekend feeling helpless. He knew his father was trapped in a cage built from love and lies. And the lock was a woman who knew exactly how to keep him inside. The truth came out 6 months later. Richard was rushed to the hospital after collapsing at home. A heart attack, the doctor said, serious but not fatal. Ethan arrived that night and found Amber in the waiting room. She was taking selfies, posing with red eyes and perfect makeup. Her caption read, "Stay strong, love conquers pain." Ethan walked past her without a word. Inside the ICU, his father looked fragile and pale. Tubes surrounded him. Machines beeped steadily beside his bed. When Richard saw Ethan, he began to cry. "I'm sorry," he whispered, squeezing his son's hand. Ethan tried to stay strong, but his chest tightened. Amber visited only a few times, always briefly. She complained about the hospital food and her mental health. She told a nurse, "I didn't sign up for this kind of stress." Richard heard her, but said nothing. He looked ashamed, as if it was his fault. Over the next week, the truth started leaking out. Richard confessed what he had discovered before the heart attack. Amber had been cheating for months, maybe years. He'd seen the messages by accident on her phone. She told him the affairs didn't mean anything. She said she was just lonely because he was boring. When he confronted her about a younger man named Brett, she laughed. She told him he should be grateful she was still there. "You're old, Richard. Most women wouldn't stay with you," she said. That was the night Richard went to see his lawyer. He made arrangements quietly, with no one's knowledge. He rewrote his will and sealed it with new instructions. He wasn't angry. He was heartbroken but determined. He said to Ethan, "It's not about revenge. It's about doing what's right." Amber continued her life as if nothing had happened. She threw a small wellness retreat while Richard was still recovering. She posted beach photos with captions about healing energy. Richard stayed silent but made one final decision. He transferred his assets into a charitable trust. He named it after his late wife and his best friend. He wanted his money to help children without families. The attorney assured him everything was legal and protected. When Richard left the hospital, he looked calmer, lighter. Ethan noticed the change and felt a flicker of hope. Maybe his father was finally seeing clearly again. But the damage was already done to his heart. 3 months later, Richard died in his sleep. Amber announced it on Instagram before calling Ethan. She posted a black and white selfie with the caption, "Devastated beyond words." 4 hours later, she finally called him, pretending to cry. Ethan sat in silence, staring at the phone. He knew the woman on the other end wasn't mourning. She was calculating. What she didn't know was that the man she thought she destroyed had already set her fate in motion. And the moment she walked into that lawyer's office, she would learn the truth. The morning of the funeral felt unreal. Ethan woke early, dressed in silence, and drove to the lawyer's office. Marcus, his father's lifelong friend, was already waiting inside. Amber arrived 20 minutes late, heels clicking on the marble floor. She wore a tight black dress that looked more suited for a red carpet. Her face was flawless, her smile cold and confident. "This better be quick," she said. "We have a funeral to attend." The lawyer, Mr. Harris, nodded calmly and opened a folder. "Your late husband made several changes to his will," he said. Amber leaned forward eagerly, ready to hear about her fortune. At the time of death, Mr. Parker's assets totaled $4.2 million. Amber's eyes gleamed as she reached for her phone to calculate. But Harris's tone changed. "However, he created a new trust 3 weeks ago." Amber frowned. "A what?" "A charitable trust. the lawyer replied. He left everything to charity. The room went silent. Amber laughed nervously. You're joking. That's ridiculous. I assure you it's quite real, Harris said, sliding documents across the desk. Richard's estate now belonged to the Grace and Thomas Children's Foundation. The charity's mission was to support orphanages and foster care programs. Amber's hands trembled as she read. I'm his wife, she said. I have rights. Actually, you don't, the lawyer answered evenly. You signed a prenuptial agreement before marriage. Amber's voice cracked. That's impossible. I never signed anything like that. Harris showed her the signature. Is this not yours? Her face went pale as she recognized it. The prenup stated that infidelity forfeits all inheritance rights, he continued. Amber slammed the papers down. This isn't legal. He wasn't well. The lawyer opened another envelope. Your husband anticipated that argument, he said softly. Inside was a sealed letter, written by Richard himself. Ethan's stomach twisted as the lawyer began to read aloud. I, Richard Parker, being of sound mind, confirm this will is my true wish. My wife, Amber Parker, has betrayed our marriage through multiple affairs. I choose to leave my legacy to children who have no one, instead of a woman who saw me only as a bank account. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as the letter ended. Amber shouted, he was manipulated. He didn't mean this. Harris placed a USB drive on the table. There's also a video, he said quietly. The screen lit up with Richard's tired but steady face. Amber, his voice echoed, if you're watching this, you're contesting my will. I know about Brett, about every man you lied about. You laughed when I confronted you. You said I should be grateful. So I'm giving my money to someone who deserves it. Amber screamed and stood up, shaking. This is your fault, she yelled at Ethan. He didn't move. He just stared as she stormed out. Mr. Harris exhaled and turned to Ethan. Your father named you executive director of the foundation, he said. Ethan nodded, tears falling. For the first time in years, he felt peace. His father had finally freed himself, even in death. The funeral was held in the same church where Richard married his first wife. The hall was full of people whose lives he had touched. Friends, business partners, neighbors, and old colleagues filled every pew. Ethan stood near the front, silent, holding back emotion. Amber arrived late again, dressed in designer black with diamond earrings. She looked like she was attending a premiere, not a funeral. Her makeup was flawless, her expression calculated. Ethan's wife, Claire, whispered, she doesn't even look sad. Amber sat in the front row, dabbing fake tears with a silk handkerchief. Her friends, mostly influencers, held their phones low, secretly filming. The service was beautiful and solemn. Marcus spoke about Richard's kindness, honesty, and quiet strength. Ethan followed, sharing memories of road trips and late-night talks. Amber never spoke, though she had demanded earlier to be included. Ethan had made sure she wasn't on the program. When the ceremony ended, everyone moved to the reception hall. People mingled, shared coffee, and told stories about Richard's generosity. Then Amber's voice broke through the noise like thunder. I'm glad he's dead, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her group of friends froze, eyes wide in horror. Amber kept going, oblivious. Now I can finally use his inheritance for my surgery. The room went silent, every conversation dying instantly. Ethan turned slowly, disbelief on his face. Amber laughed lightly, sipping champagne. He was so controlling about money, she added. Now I can get my revision done. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people started recording on their phones. Before Ethan could move, Mr. Harris, the lawyer, stepped forward. Excuse me, Mrs. Parker, he said calmly. She turned annoyed. What, Harris? Can't you see I'm talking? Yes, he replied, his voice steady. But I think there's been a misunderstanding. He raised his voice slightly so everyone could hear. The inheritance you're referring to does not exist. Amber blinked, confused. What are you talking about? As I explained this morning, Harris said, you won't receive a single dollar. The entire room stared. He continued, your late husband left everything to charity, all of it. Amber's face drained of color. That was supposed to be private. Harris adjusted his glasses. You announced it publicly. I'm only clarifying. You can't do this to me, she shouted. I'm his wife. You also signed a prenuptial agreement, forfeiting all rights due to infidelity. Her hands shook. You can't prove anything. Actually, we can, Harris replied. Your affairs are well documented. The crowd gasped again. Amber's voice cracked. This is harassment. Robert left one final message for you, Harris said evenly. He paused, then added. He asked me to remind you to cancel your next surgery appointment. Laughter burst through the hall. Amber's knees buckled. She fainted, collapsing to the floor. Paramedics arrived, checked her, and declared she was fine. When she got up, mascara streaked down her face like war paint. She stormed out, her friends following, deleting videos as they left. Ethan watched her go, the tension finally lifting from the room. Marcus whispered, your dad would have loved that. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, he really would have. By the next day, the videos had gone viral. Amber became a meme, the woman who lost millions to orphans. Her followers vanished, her sponsors cut ties, her reputation was gone. For the first time, justice felt real. Richard's legacy lived on through kindness, not vanity. Amber's empire of lies crumbled under her own words. And Ethan finally felt peace, knowing his father's story ended with truth. 6 months passed, and peace finally returned to Ethan's life. He moved back to Portland with Claire and took charge of the foundation. The Grace and Thomas Children's Foundation began changing lives. Donations funded schools, shelters, and college scholarships for orphans. Ethan spent his days reading letters from children thanking his father. Each message reminded him that Richard's heart still lived on. One day, a package arrived from a small orphanage in Arizona. Inside were drawings from kids holding signs that said thank you. Ethan smiled through tears as he placed them on the office wall. Right beside them was a photo of his father and mother together. Marcus entered the room and said, he'd be proud of you, son. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight finally lift from his shoulders. Meanwhile, Amber's glamorous life had vanished completely. She worked at a mall kiosk, selling phone cases to strangers. Her social media was gone, her fame erased by her own greed. Ethan never spoke her name again. He didn't need revenge. The world had already delivered it. And in the quiet of his office, surrounded by children's drawings, Ethan finally whispered, you did the right thing, Dad.